again, beautiful souls. Well, here we are again in part 3 of this tour through the afterlife. So, as I said last time, if you haven't yet watched part 1 and 2, I would highly recommend it so you'll understand more clearly the progression of this journey. You know, frankly, the further Aura and I went into the afterlife, the more difficult it becomes to describe these realms. But, of course, I'll do my best. So, at this point, Aura took a moment to explain how when the brain dies and consciousness moves on, everything you are and have been continues to be alive in the mind of Source. Well, she led me into an area that looked very Earth-like. She said that this was what was referred to as the in-between. Well, I found myself floating above a sort of mishmash of different environments with people wandering about within these zones. I was constantly aware here of a melodious stream of musical notes and sounds, music, permeating this atmosphere. Well, Aura described this in-between as a place for those who were so indoctrinated by what they had believed while on Earth that when they died, they found themselves in very similar circumstances to those that they had just left. Well, for example, in one area, there was a little community of souls living in houses, and scattered among those houses were several places of worship, like churches, synagogues, with an impressive mosque on the hillside. There were several statues of Jesus and other religious leaders, and we could see an occasional priest or rabbi walking through the streets. Aura stated that this section was inhabited by souls who were so consumed by their religious beliefs that, as a collective, they created this illusion as their reality. They believed that this was the heaven that would exist for them at death. And they may end up staying in this dream reality for hundreds of years in our time, praying and worshiping and never asking if there's anything beyond this place. Well, there were other little segregated areas distributed throughout. One that had people living in very poor conditions, houses and apartments kind of jammed in next to each other, cramped quarters. This was formed by those who died believing that poverty is all they deserved. And these inhabitants were suspicious and bitter towards each other. And the thoughts of those in this area were heavy and gloomy, which affected everything around them. The skies were dark and dismal, and there were occasional storms caused by those thought forms of futility and disappointment. Other areas seemed much more pleasant, yet still with people who only wanted or expected a continuation of their earth life. These souls found themselves living in neighborhoods and houses just like they left. They had no aspirations to learn or grow spiritually or better themselves. All they wanted was another earth life. So this is where they arrived. These people were often met by their relatives or friends of their past lifetimes. And they were content to carry on exactly where they left off. For example, they had TVs in their living rooms and ate meals just like before. They did the same chores, buying groceries and mowing their lawns. Aura said that these souls are often visited by teachers and guides from the higher realms, suggesting to them that there's more for them. And if they choose to move on, they can have wonderful adventures in glorious realms. However, they can also choose to remain here for as long as they want. Aura did say, though, that most will soon become bored with this mundane life and ask to move on at some point. You know, the most important message of this realm is what you do today, now in your life, affects where you will go at death. Aura paused here and described a time after the soul has reached the higher planes of existence where it will need to withdraw from its environment and consider its next move. There's a realm created for this contemplative stage where the soul can go to meditate over their previous life and what it has achieved since coming into the afterlife in order to determine its next step. Well, these next spheres are for the advancing soul, where they can speak to their inner being or higher self and decide where they are on their journey back to source. It's a time of reflection over all choices and actions they made in the last incarnation and what they've since learned in the afterlife realms. This is a very peaceful and dreamlike realm where they will have access to any memories or information they may need for an informed decision. Some souls spend a very long time in this realm, just going over the events in their lives without any, outside judgment or advice. Well, after the soul emerges from this sphere of contemplation, they're asked by their advisor if they're ready for their life review. Well, some refuse and say they don't want a life review. Well, the guides let them know that they can choose to wait until they're ready. And some choose to put it off for many years, our time. There's time is different in the afterlife. So many years may seem, like moments to them. However, Aura said that there is an inner need within each returning soul to understand where they are in their journey. And without the life review, they don't have all the needed information to make any further decisions and will finally decide to review their life. She said it's like the voice of their own conscience urging them to evaluate where they've been and where they are now. And this is not unpleasant for the soul. It's a beautiful, quiet reflection, bringing them back to a remembrance of their core essence, where they're urged through the inner self to review the life they just left. Well, I remember Aura brought me to a space where a soul was just beginning its life review. And it was an amazing thing to watch and feel. This soul, in a very calm, dreamlike state, is led by a spirit guide into a beautiful building with large pillars on either side of two huge doors. Well, inside, and she said that it's not always this way. It's different for every soul, but this is what we were watching. Well, inside this huge space, they're brought into a large, brightly lit hall or assembly room with a table and chairs in the center. And the guide will then access a record of the soul's life. Aura told me it's a record of everything that soul has ever done since leaving Source and becoming an individual soul, including every life, every breath, every idea and thought, word, intention, pain, and joy, ever lived or reasoned by this soul. Well, as we watched, a doorway opened in front of us. It was much like viewing an entire reality through a sort of portal or window. It was like peeking into another world. We could see this soul as a baby, and then as a little boy, then a teenager, into his adult years. Well, occasionally the guide would ask him questions, and the soul would reply. At any time, what they were reviewing became too harsh or painful for the soul, the guide would stop the recording and take the soul to a place where he could rest and recover until he was ready to continue. Aura explained that for the soul who is watching the review, it's like taking part in the event just as it was lived the very first time. Every word and emotion. The fascinating thing is that the soul will also become the others within the event and feel all those emotions and feelings of the others in that same occasion. If the soul hurt another's feelings, for example, they will not only be the perpetrator of that hurt, but the recipient, feeling the humiliation they felt at that moment. Aura said that many times the soul will feel terrible pangs of regret and guilt, some more than others. Each life is different and individual. The review we were watching took place over what felt like years, stopping and starting again. It was fascinating for me, but was obviously difficult in some places for the soul whose life that actually was. Here, Aura took another moment to make the point once again that those who have attained spiritual knowledge within their human life, their life review will either be much more condensed than what we just watched, or there may be no need for a life review at all. Those who, in life, spent time in contemplation, going over their choices and behavior throughout life, what we call shadow work, are already performing their own life review and will not need to repeat it on the spirit side. Well, after the soul has finished the review, he's taken to a lovely area of grassy hills and meadows where he can, lean against a tree and spend time in restful contemplation for as long as desired. At some point, the advisors will come and talk to him about how he's now feeling about that life. Ora said that once everything is learned from that lifetime, those memories will all soon begin to fade away into the background, like waking from a dream. However, if the soul feels unsatisfied, unfinished, it may begin to consider returning to Earth for another life, or repeat the same one that they just left. However, the guides do not advise souls to do this. When this is the case, these angelic advisors will do their best to help them to understand that once they realize they could have done better and addressed any limitations, there's no need to return to Earth. It's important that the soul understand returning into another human incarnation is not the only choice. It's feeling the remorse that they are feeling and the desire to do better that allows them to eventually move on further. Ora described a place where these souls will spend some time reflecting upon those moments that they could have been maybe more patient or loving or compassionate, and will move into a realm of learning these coping strategies through taking classes taught by high-level light beings. The souls will be allowed all the time they need to confront those things that they regret and take the steps to learn ways of accepting and forgiving these poor choices. They will be advised to take certain classes to master these shortcomings before moving on. It's all about love and mercy. And sometimes another life on Earth is not always the best place to learn this. Ora then showed me what looked very much like an attractive university campus with stately brick structures, with people wandering in and out of the buildings, and some sitting on the lawn or sitting in the sun, and many holding what looked to me like an iPad or a tablet. Others walking around or just visiting with each other. She said this was an area within the afterlife where eager, intelligent souls wanting to learn and improve themselves gather to gain knowledge. These classes are taught by wise, high-level energy beings, some ascended masters who, after their ascension, chose to remain on this level rather than to go home to Source, because it is their greatest fulfillment to help others to attain entrance into the higher frequencies beyond these cleansing and educational realms. This is where souls can obtain knowledge through classes or tutoring. There's also a sort of a library filled with instructional materials and information. Anything you might want to learn in this educational zone, where souls can study any subject of interest, anything, and get together and discuss theories and ideas. Ora said these souls are able to go into this library and check out holographic visual depictions of anything they were curious about or ever wanted to learn. This research will be a valuable guide to help them in deciding their next role and whether they will incarnate physically again or move on into the even higher spheres. It surprised me how Earth-like this area was. You know, other than that constant background music, tones, chords, it could have been any educational institution on Earth. And again, you know, in this realm, you don't have to move anywhere. You're just instantly there in this timeless zone. So again, without walking or moving anywhere, we suddenly found ourselves inside one of the classrooms. Well, at the head of the class, standing on a stage behind a podium, was a glowing humanoid figure, what I would call a light being, speaking to numerous people sitting in chairs facing the front of the room. This radiant form, to me, looked to be at least 8 or 9 feet tall. And the people, or students, sitting in the chairs, listening, they all appeared to be maybe 25 to 30 years old. I was just fascinated with this scene and moved closer to the chairs at the back of the room and just stood there watching. Interestingly, I could understand everything that this being of light was saying, although I couldn't make out its face clearly enough to see any features, like, you know, a mouth, to see if the dialogue was verbal or telepathic. And Aura just waited patiently for the class to be excused before she interrupted. As we watched the students getting up from their chairs to leave, a young man looked straight at me, obviously seeing me clearly, and said, "You're not supposed to be here." Well, I was shocked to realize he could see me. And I really didn't know what to say. The only thing that came to mind was, "Oh, I'm just visiting." He kind of shrugged and moved on. I looked over at Aura and said, "How could he see me? I thought you said we were invisible." Well, Aura said, "You were so delighted with what you were watching that your frequency rose to match that of the young man's, and you became visible to him. The reason he said you're not supposed to be here is he could tell that you were still alive by the energy cable connected to your body that some call the silver cord, which is severed at death. It can only be seen by one in the astral or spiritual realms." Then, once again, instantly everything changed from the scene that we were in, and the entire energetic atmosphere rose. I could feel it. I discovered we were enveloped in a sort of golden cloud, and I could no longer discern my body. It seemed to have become a part of the cloud. Although I still sensed a body, it was no longer visible. Here, Aura directed me to turn my attention behind me. And even though I didn't seem to have a body, I could perceive my focus reversing direction. And the moment I did this, I noticed the music increased in strength, and instantaneously I felt a wave of what I can only describe as the most profound and purest love I have ever felt or even imagined. This surge of love was so intense it nearly suffocated my senses. I mean, seriously, it's impossible to describe. This feeling flooded over me. I was submerged in it. I was floating in a radiant ocean of emotional warmth. It was as if I were drowning in a sort of ecstatic spiritual or divine passion. It overtook my awareness, and all I was conscious of was this euphoria. Well, at some point, I could hear Aura's voice again, directing me to focus on the scene in front of me. Well, as I did, it was like I had my eyes closed and was trying to open them. As I tried to do what she asked me, my senses slowly started returning, and I could hear her telling me that I would not be allowed to go further. She instructed me again to focus straight ahead, and when I did, I could discern movement and what looked like the most brilliant and brightest white light I had ever seen. It was like the entire space had expanded a thousandfold, and this powerful light encompassed the entire expanse ahead. The brilliance and strength of the light, if I'd had a body, should have been blinding to my eyes. Yet I could look directly at it. And I felt a sort of attraction, an intense, like a magnetic pull drawing me forward. Well, what took my attention was that this oscillating light, this radiance, was in the shape of a toroidal field that moved in constant rotational motion. I was fascinated with this brilliance twisting in on itself. I could hear Aura's voice informing me that it is from this realm that allows the soul passage to all stages of unification within the Absolute. That when a soul reaches this stage, it will have the key to all knowledge and can choose to proceed toward a partial or total oneness with the Prime Creator. It's from within this realm or sphere where anything that is not possible material or physically is allowed to unfold. Aura referred to this realm as a space of mental perception, thought, a conceptual kingdom of intention and belief, where every idea or concept holds the potential for life. She described that this is where the soul has incorporated everything experienced in the lower realms. Aura called it the domain of God. She said that it's here where the soul can become the amalgamation, the essence of all that it has ever been or ever will be, because it can never be more than whole. You know, when I try to revisit this experience, it feels like at this point I just sort of lost myself, like I was floating in this timeless, what should I say, place or reality, and have no memory of what happened next, or where I went from here. I will say that the memories now of this light and the intense feelings of love are still so clear and real to me that any time I go back in my memory, I'm overcome with an emotion that doesn't exist here on earth. Or if it does, I haven't felt it here. All I remember from here was Aura's voice whispering my name and telling me to sleep. The next day, I did my best to write it all out. But I've never felt like I really captured the essence of that domain of God, as Aura put it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this afterlife series. And all I can do is hope that I've somehow been able to take you along with me so that you might possibly have a deeper view of this spectacularly extraordinary realm that we all came from and will return to. I love you guys. Bye.